Namaste, Jai Hind, and this is a conversation I always look forward to because often we are always in this whole argument between science and spirituality. Are they two parallel tracks or are they leaning on each other? So when you have a neuroscientist who's also talking about a higher consciousness and is the chair of the Maharishi Mahesh Yogi Foundation, then you know that there is science and spirituality. They're not parallel lines. They work simultaneously. Dr. Tony Nader, namaste.
Namaste, it's a joy to be with you again.
Yes, again. So, and now you've just written another book which says consciousness is all there is. So let's start from there. If science comes and says eventually it's all about consciousness, and spirituality also is about a higher consciousness, how are the twain meeting? Explain this to us.
Reality is one, ultimately. We cannot be two realities, but we approach it from different angles, different perspectives. There are two things in science that people forget about. There is the scientific method, which is very reliable, repeatable, controlled studies, logical. And there is creeping into the scientific method a dogma, a belief, which is based on non-scientific factors. And that belief is that everything starts with some energy and develops, and that consciousness emerges later in the process. That's completely a dogma. Let's set this clear. There is no proof whatsoever that this is the case, and that is where a bit of philosophy comes into thinking how consciousness emerges. The ancient Vedic literature says that consciousness is primary.
Yeah.
Now, there is a gap here, and it is how, if consciousness is the origin, how does it appear as matter and physicality? This is what my book discusses. In part of it, of course, there are many other aspects, but basically to bridge the gap between if consciousness is primary, if everything comes from consciousness, how do we have this physicality and materiality?
Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita talks about the Jiva Tattva and how matter takes different forms or manifestations, but there is a core Tattva which is an extension of the original origin or God himself or Krishna himself. So that's part of our Vedic scriptures. Science today is between these two arguments, one which you say is dogma and the other which says that consciousness is the origin of it or antimatter, or I don't know how you would describe it. But how do we make both philosophies, that is the spiritual thought process and the scientific thought process or the modern science, how does it come together? Do you make that argument in that one cannot compete with the other and one has to supplement the other?
One has to supplement the other. The thing is, if you use the scientific method and the logic of science, you find that you can have an argument which is very powerful that consciousness is primary. And in fact, it's not matter that take different things. It's consciousness that appears as different aspects, and it has many layers of consciousness. There is the unbounded consciousness, which is, if you look at physics, for example, that shows us that from the surface value of things and objects, and you go deeper and deeper, you find a non-material. So that's why they went from material aspects to physical aspect, which means you go to energy, and energy is equivalent to matter. And then you go deeper, you find fields, and those fields, electromagnetism, gravitational fields, have been more and more unified. So we know that at the essence of everything is a field of being, and it's a mathematical field which is non-physical really, and it has probabilities and possibilities. And it's only when you observe it, when your consciousness observes it, that it collapses into specificity. This is a bit of a bit more of scientific, but this is very real. And that's not the only argument about consciousness. The argument really about the validity of the paradigm that consciousness is primary comes from a convergence of factors, many factors converging together. One is the scientific findings themselves about what reality is made of, but also there is logic, there is this dichotomy of consciousness and matter and how to solve it, how to solve this diversity. There is the finding that our senses actually give us only a very partial limited reality, perception of reality. And if our senses were more refined, we would see much more and many different things than what we see on the surface level. There is the logical argument of how it's possible that consciousness can emerge or matter can emerge from consciousness. And there are experimental factors, such as, for example, practicing transcendental meditation and meditation techniques that are purely mental techniques that actually change the physiology. And more recent studies, and there are many of those, that show that can change the behavior even in society. So when you put all of this together, rather than just taking one argument, you find very strong, convincing evidence that consciousness can be primary based on science. So science is a method, and that method can prove what is true or not, and that is what this book actually and the logic that we use supports.
Veda is knowledge, and it's also about the scriptures and the knowledge that's enshrined. And one of the aspects of Vedic practice is the Kumbh. So you were at the Kumbh. This is a Mahakumbh, 144 years, planetary alignments. Again, there is science in this whole alignment, why it's special, and constellation alignments. How was your experience at Kumbh?
My experience was very profound, dipping in with such convergence of humanity, in a sense, such a great number of people, at a place which has had before many of such worship and very deep devotion, leaves ripples in consciousness, and it's almost memorized and remembered by the atmosphere, by the place together. Because when you say that consciousness is primary, and in fact consciousness is all there is, it's all a manifestation of consciousness. So there is something that has been developed there, or there was an original value which has been strengthened by the belief in it, by the strength of it, by the planetary arrangement. And so when you come there, there is a moment of ecstasy, a moment of wholeness, a moment of unity.
Yeah, I felt it.
Yes, exactly. You dip down, it's like almost I go beyond the surface of reality and I am one with all of you, and you come out in a unity consciousness state. And so this really is scientific in the sense, science might not be able to kind of put consciousness in a lab and study it, but science can study the effects of consciousness. We can study what happens when you develop your consciousness, what happens when you transcend, what happens when you do such a thing. And the studies have shown that there is tremendous development in well-being, in wholeness, in behavior, in acceptance, in tolerance. And that is what we see beautifully in Bharat, in the great India. It's the most open heart in the world, which says, the world is my family. And Prime Minister Ji, I use the term Vishwaguru. He said, I don't use this term anymore. I use Vishwabandhu, because we are the brother, or Vishwamitra maybe. We can use the brother, the friend of all. And that is because the culture, the tradition, the knowledge of India is true. And what is the truth? Truth is that we are all one, ultimately in the ocean, and then the waves. We are many waves on the surface, but this is looking at ourselves from a very small, minor perspective of our reality. If we dive deep from the wave, we find we are the ocean. And if we are the ocean, we are one with everyone.
True.
And that's what you feel at the Kumbh. And it has so many wonderful effects on your well-being, on your health, on your hopes, on your, removing your mental tension, your anxiety, depression, because you just now are one with everything. You remove loneliness because you are one with everything, so you can't be lonely.
But Dr. Nader, there are always conflicting forces and also entities which tend to challenge the basic human value systems. So you talked about Bharat, and Bharat has a family value system. There is a certain respect. There are certain boundaries of morality and certain domains where people will not cross. But in today's day and age, we see influences which make abuse, even in terms of comedy, very stylish, or they believe this is what I need to do to draw viewers in. And then there are no boundaries. This entire aspect of freedom of speech also tends to work where many feel it dilutes our core value systems. How would you look at what needs to be done to counter it? Are laws going to counter this? Or is parenting and perhaps reinstilling those value systems going to counter it? Because these forces are also popular and they have the ability to influence minds. So they can also corrupt an entire generation. So I want your thoughts there.
If I had to answer in 2-3 words, I would say Satyameva Jayate, which means truth always triumphs. And people try to mess up and have different ideas, and there is some randomness and some chaos that can come, that can disrupt it. But ultimately, with time, that which is true will always be the winner. It will overcome the challenges. And what we need to do is experience the self. And by experiencing it, you know from firsthand what is guiding you towards the right path. People think that we have to impose law, but law can come naturally when one is aligned with the self. So in yoga, there is yam, niyam, asanas, pranayam, pratyahar, dhara, dhyan, samadhi.
Yeah.
If you transcend, yam and niyam will become naturally evolved, because this system of going back to the self awakens within you that which is true. If you try to impose on people ideas as being dogma again, and that is how it should be, and there is no logic that they can understand, for example, in the Veda, in the Vedic literature, that are things that today are challenging. For example, you have people with 10 heads, you have 4 arms, you do this, you do that, and it sounds magical and unusual, and so the young people are threatened or challenged by their friends who are more down to earth on the right things, and then they will think, well, I'm embarrassed to say and to accept those things. But when you find that those even are scientific, that Veda and the Vedic personalities, the Vedic Devata, the Vedic realities are within us, and they are laws of nature, as Maharishi Mahesh Yogi has explained to us, has taught me personally and all, the world, that actually all of these are expressions of laws of nature in a more complex, sophisticated way.
But Dr. Nader, someone who's a higher mortal like Arjun, he himself was confused, and that too at the battlefield. Now he had Krishna as a Sarathi who said, okay, I'm going to set you on the right path and I'm going to reset your mental focus. How do we do that for this generation? They are nowhere clear to who Arjun was as a higher mortal. So how do we do that for this generation?
I'm really glad you mentioned that. This is wonderful. Because the one teaching that Krishna gave to Arjuna, even trying to explain to him the logic, the intellect, the knowledge, and all of that, but when it was coming to an end, he said, Yogasta kuru karmani. You want to act? Nistre gunyo bhava. Be without the gunas, be without all these things on the surface, all the analysis, transcend. Established in being, perform action. This is exactly what Maharishi Mahesh Yogi has taught us. Transcend and then act. Yogastha, established in being, spontaneously your action will be in accordance with the laws of nature. Spontaneously, without being forced to it. You will enlighten yourself. You will remove the glasses that are tainted, that are not clear, that are showing you the world through a certain perspective, and you will see clearly because you are then established in yourself. So that is the true solution, and that is the offer of Bharat to Bharat and to the world.
But that's the problem, Dr. Nader. See, it's easier. He said this in just one sutra, but it's so complicated. And you said, how do I separate myself from the 3 gunas? Everybody is largely somewhere in Rajas wanting to move towards Sat, but it's Tamas that is being shown as cool.
Yeah.
So how does this generation, and that too about 650 million youngsters, that's the demographic dividend as the Prime Minister says of Bharat, how do we steer them towards Sat and then to a place where they are, yogastha, where they can go ahead and ensure that their consciousness drives things rather than other forces?
It's by practicing a technology. What is beautiful about the knowledge of the Veda is that it's not just a science in terms of theory. It has a technology. It's practical.
So
And
there's a science involved there too.
Yes, there is science and there is technology. And there is science of consciousness and technologies of consciousness. That is why it has not left you. The rishis didn't just leave you, oh, there is a beautiful thing, and go out and try to find it. It gives you a systematic step and a systematic technology of doing it. And what we have is this Bhavati Dhyan, this transcendental meditation, which says, okay, you are fighting on the surface of the ocean of being because there is a storm. What do? Anchor yourself in yourself. And where is that self? It's not outside. If you try to find it outside and discuss logics and discuss the gunas and their actions and the rajas and the tamas and all of that, you're going to be fighting, because on the ocean of the surface, storms happen and you become a football of the situations and circumstances. They kick you around. What do? Transcend. Bhavati. Go to the self. Transcend. Yogastha means go to the self. And that is what Maharishi has taught us, transcendental meditation. That's why we call it transcendental meditation. There are many kinds of meditation. You can have, contemplation, concentration. Fine, it's, you would think of the surface and you focus yourself. What you do when you are in the storm, leave the storm, go to the bottom of the ocean, put your anchor there, and then you are solid and strong. And that depth of being is within us. It's not something outside us. So go back to the self in order to be dynamic and powerful on the outside.
But we are a nation that's 20% of the world's population. So we are about 1.4 billion people and counting. So it's not going to be possible for all of this huge swath of humanity to reach a higher consciousness. So is there a formula there? Is there a smaller number, a basic number? If they are able to achieve this level of higher consciousness, a nation can turn.
Beautiful, thank you. You're guiding me into something I would have loved to say by myself. First, it is possible for everyone, because the techniques that are offered, transcendental meditation, is a do-it-yourself technique. The teacher teaches you this, and then you're on your own. So you're not dependent on having a daily follow-up and care, which is usually great, but in this technique, just you do it yourself.
Correct.
So that is therefore open to everyone, and we have teachers, they can teach everyone. Now, in the meantime, because it takes time to teach and to raise everyone's awareness, Maharishi has said that when a small percentage of people practice this program together, because we are all connected on the level of consciousness, we should see changes in society. So in the 1970s, the scientists have said, okay, let's see which cities have learned 1% of the people, because 1% was what Maharishi predicted, and which cities have not learned 1%. And they found that those who have 1% of the population meditating had decrease in crime.
Oh, wow.
Compared to those control groups. So here again, the method of science comes and helps us to say there is a group that does this, there is a group that doesn't this, and this is the difference. Since then, we had 116 different research studies on this subject alone. And we have found that when a square root of 1% of the population practices these more advanced programs from the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, which we call the Siddhis, then there is a transformation in society. And the longitudinal study that was done in the US over many, many years, comparing the numbers and when this happens and when this didn't happen, showed that whenever the numbers have reached that critical number, there was decrease in accidents of the road, decrease in crime, decrease in conflict, decrease in hospital admission, even decrease in infant mortality, decrease in drug use,
wow,
which were independent factors, but they are all in the positive direction. So that is our proposal, which we call the Maharishi effect, in honor of Maharishi who predicted it, that if we create that number of people, and for the whole world it's only really 10,000 that practice this program morning and evening together in one place, otherwise we will need 1%, and 1% of the world population is 81 million. It's a little bit large, but the square root of that is 9,000, and if we have 10,000 for safety purpose, or even have 2 7 groups, we should be seeing general effect even for the whole world.
So why not make it 100,000 in Bharat itself? And that's something that is possible. Tell us a little about the Ramayana University. I believe you were in Ayodhya also. So you come to Bharat and then you're everywhere, and all the spiritual hubs. So what were you doing in Ayodhya?
Yeah, when I'm in India, in Bharat, I want to be everywhere because everywhere there is something to learn, something to experience. It's wonderful. So Ayodhya is a great place. It was Maharishi's desire that a university would be there and that would teach Ramayana in a scientific way.
Before you complete, do you feel that place has changed? Do you feel the energies there have changed?
Absolutely.
Ever since the temple and Pran Pratishtha, do you believe there is a different vibe?
Absolutely, absolutely. There is a freedom and liberation and enlivenment of consciousness, and more is coming as the temple is getting bigger and more completed. We went there and we, Ram Lala, we paid our homage and great experience. And the university is absolutely guided towards showing that all aspects of the Ramayana are science.
Okay.
They are science of life, science of living, science even of physiology, and that all the characters and the dynamics that happen in the Ramayana are actually the dynamics of our own human evolution. So for example, at the end of the Ramayana there is Ram Raj that gets established. How does it happen in our physiology? Ram Raj for our body and mind is enlightenment, moksha, liberation. And so I have done research on this as Ramayana.
You have your book, Ramayana and Human Physiology, yes.
Yeah, this one.
Yes.
And it actually shows where Sita is, where Ram is, why they interact like this, what are the dynamics that happen, where every rishi is in our body, even rivers, lakes, whatever Ram encounters in his past, they are all part of our human dynamics and human physiology.
Final question, Bharat, you travel the world. Do you believe this is, many say this is the century of Bharat. Prime Minister has put in a vision where we can, in the next 20-25 years, hope to be a developed nation. But everybody looks at development differently. So the Prime Minister's vision is that we have to be true to our culture, become the Vishwa Bandhu, as he said, Vishwamitra, and be a beacon for spirituality and spiritual solace. But do you see Bharat having that potential? The current Bharat around you, the people you meet, and you've been coming here for decades. So that's why I'm asking you, is there really, are we on the cusp? Is this our Jambavan Hanuman moment in our civilization?
With the blessings of Sri Narendra Modi ji, I think it is happening. It's really beautiful to see Ram coming back. And Ram is natural law. It's for everybody. People mix it up that it's just for some people and the religion.
Otherwise, Hindu and Hindutva.
Right, no, it's wholeness, it's fullness, it's dynamism in accordance with natural law. Natural law are the laws of nature. You know, whether you are Hindu or Jain or Muslim or Jewish or Christian or whatever, laws are laws of nature. Truth is one. And what Ram is just that wholeness, that unifying value. So nobody should be afraid of those values. And so what I see is, yes, India, Bharat is rising and will continue to rise. And we are most inspired and most humbled and honored that we have this great leadership that is guiding this great nation to maintain its values, its strengths, its spirituality, because this will save not only India, but the entire world, actually.
Well, as they say, and as Dr. Nader says, consciousness where it all is all that there is. So absolutely, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Lovely speaking with you as always, Dr.
Always
Nader.
a joy, my joy. Thank you for taking the time.
Namaste.
Namaste.